Central, this is Unit 4. We've got a male subject loitering near the luxury wing. Black hoodie, dark jeans, sunglasses. No bags. No purchases. He's been circling high-end stores for over 45 minutes. Possible casing. Requesting visual confirmation. The static-laced voice crackled across the mall's internal security radio network as Officer Brian Huxley adjusted the volume dial on his earpiece. From the security office, he tapped the touchscreen to zoom in on the suspect's figure, captured clearly by camera 12 outside the Rolex boutique. The man stood still, hands in his pockets, seemingly mesmerized by a watch on display. His head tilted slightly to the side, body posture relaxed, but alert. Something about the way he moved felt calculated. Huxley frowned. That's the third time he stopped in front of Rolex, he muttered to his partner, Officer Kayla Ramirez, who was already monitoring footage from the Gucci store. He hasn't bought a damn thing, Kayla said, adjusting her glasses. Rolex, Cartier, even swung by Louis Vuitton twice. All he's doing is looking. That's a pattern. Huxley stood up. Let's make contact. Meanwhile, out on the polished marble floor of Westfield Grand Plaza, the man in question continued his silent walk through the luxury corridor. Clad in a fitted black hoodie, worn-in jeans, and pristine white sneakers, he moved with the ease of someone used to attention, yet at this moment actively avoiding it. His sunglasses were large and mirrored, concealing his face even in the glow of the indoor lights. The hoodie was pulled halfway over his head, shadowing the rest. He wasn't in a rush. In fact, his steps were slow, intentional. He paused briefly to glance at a pair of Italian leather boots in the window of a high-end boutique. He didn't go in, just watched. He leaned closer for a better look at the stitching detail, then moved on, silent as a breeze. Most customers passed him by without a second look. But the sales associate at the Cartier store had noticed. A young man in his early 20s, dressed in a sleek gray suit, he leaned in to whisper something to his manager. The manager, a middle-aged woman with tightly pinned hair and a stiff jawline, nodded once, then subtly tapped her phone. Within 2 minutes, Huxley and Ramirez appeared on the floor, flanking both ends of the corridor, approaching slowly but deliberately. The man had now stopped again, this time at the edge of a jewelry kiosk that specialized in vintage rings and custom gold chains. His fingers barely grazed the glass as he leaned in to examine a rare timepiece from the 1960s. That's when the voice rang out. "Excuse me, sir," Huxley said firmly, stepping forward, hand resting gently but intentionally near his belt. "Can I have a word with you?" The man turned slowly, almost like he'd been expecting it. His face remained unreadable behind the sunglasses. "Of course," he replied. "Come." Composed. A faint accent, British but subtle enough to go unnoticed by those not paying attention. "We've received some concerns from store staff," Officer Ramirez added, stepping beside her partner. "You've been walking around the high-end section for over an hour, looking into windows, not making any purchases. Employees are a bit uneasy." "I didn't realize looking at merchandise was a crime," the man said, his tone flat but without hostility. Huxley raised an eyebrow. "It's not. But given recent incidents, we're extra cautious. You don't have any shopping bags. You haven't engaged with any staff. Mind if I ask what you're doing here today?" The man took a moment before responding. "Just browsing." Ramirez folded her arms. "For an hour?" "Yes." "You from around here?" Huxley asked. "No." "Are you here alone?" "Yes." Ramirez's gaze didn't soften. "We'd like to see some ID, please." A few passers-by slowed their steps. One or two stopped entirely, pretending to look at nearby advertisements while clearly eavesdropping. A teenage girl nudged her friend and pointed subtly. "Something's going on," she whispered. The man sighed lightly. His hand moved to his jacket pocket. Then for the first time he removed his sunglasses. It was like flipping a switch. Recognition flickered across Officer Ramirez's face first. Her eyes widened, mouth slightly agape. "No way," she whispered. Huxley blinked. "You've got to be kidding me." David Beckham stood before them, unmistakable now. His sharp jawline, lightly stubbled face, and iconic presence needed no introduction. Even in the simplest clothes, he exuded an aura impossible to mimic. "I'm not here as a celebrity," he said quietly, slipping the sunglasses into his hoodie pocket. "I'm here as a businessman." He pulled a folded document from the inside of his hoodie. The top corner bore the embossed seal of the investment division of Westfield Properties. "I finalized this last week," he said, handing it over. "I am the majority investor in this property now. I wanted to walk through unnoticed, to observe how customers are treated when they don't immediately present status. Today I got my answer. The document was legit. Ramirez held it as if it were radioactive, eyes scanning the notarized pages and signatures. The security team at the kiosk behind them had paused entirely, whispering frantically. Beckham looked around. Do you know how many people have followed me with their eyes since I arrived? How many staff looked me up and down, measuring what I was wearing instead of how I was behaving? Huxley stammered, his composure cracked. Mr. Beckham, we didn't realize. That's the point, Beckham cut in, voice still even but edged with something colder. You judged me based on appearance, not action. That's a systemic problem, and I need to know if it's a one-off or your standard protocol. From behind, the Cartier manager emerged, now pale and tense. Mr. Beckham, please accept my deepest apologies. We had no idea. I know, he said, staring straight at her. But you assumed. And that's worse. By now, a crowd had formed. Small at first, but growing with every second. Cell phones were up. Some had already recognized him and were live streaming. The whispers became a low murmur. It's David Beckham. What's happening? Why are the cops here? Beckham turned slightly to face the gathering crowd. I came to this mall to see whether it's worth investing in more than just square footage. I wanted to know if this place deserved to represent something better. Today I saw that it needs work. He turned back to the officers. I'm going to need a meeting with mall management and head of security. Today. And every store manager in this wing by tonight. Huxley nodded quickly. Yes, sir. And one more thing, Beckham added, looking toward the Cartier store. That woman who called security, she's not fired. But she needs training. All of them do. Then he walked off, slow and steady, toward the mall's administrative offices. The crowd parted for him. No one dared stop him now. And in the background, the once confident hum of Westfield Grand Plaza was now hushed, carrying only the sound of realization sinking in. The man who'd walked through their mall like a stranger was, in fact, the man who now owned it. And everything from this moment forward was about to change. The door to the executive conference room clicked open with a quiet hiss, and David Beckham stepped inside without fanfare. His hoodie was still on, though he had lowered it. The sunglasses were tucked into the front pocket of his sweatshirt. Around the oval glass table sat 10 people, all handpicked by the mall's general manager in record time. They included regional store managers, head of security, a representative from Westfield's investment liaison office, and an emergency appearance from corporate legal, who had arrived breathless, with a laptop still open and glowing. The atmosphere was a cocktail of tension, embarrassment, and quiet panic. Good afternoon, Beckham began, setting down a folder on the polished table. Let's skip the small talk. I'm not here to be soothed with PR lines or empty apologies. I want answers, I want honesty, and I want change. No one said a word. He paced slowly around the room, letting the silence speak louder than anything. Do you know how many stores I passed today where I wasn't greeted? He asked, not looking at anyone in particular. 5 out of the 6 luxury retailers didn't acknowledge me. No, hello. No, can I help you? Not even a nod. But what they did manage to do, what they all did brilliantly, was alert each other, whisper behind counters, and track my movements like I was about to pull off a heist. The Cartier manager, her name badge now removed, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her hands were folded so tightly on her lap, her knuckles had turned white. David turned and looked directly at her. What was your first instinct when you saw me? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I thought maybe you weren't the usual clientele. That's one way to put it, he replied, lips tightening. The head of security, a tall man in his 50s named Chuck Harmon, cleared his throat. Mr. Beckham, our team responded to a pattern. Extended time in high-theft zones without engagement is standard for monitoring. Beckham turned toward him. Monitoring, I understand. Accusation? Confrontation? That's not standard, that's bias. He reached into his folder and pulled out a sheet of paper. This is the formal letter I intended to issue next week, outlining a plan to revitalize the mall's image, integrate more community programming, and develop a deeper relationship with the public. That was before today. Now we're skipping to a different chapter. He handed the paper to the investment liaison and continued. When I made this investment, I didn't just buy into numbers on a spreadsheet. I bought into a culture, a responsibility. I wanted to know whether this place was worth more than its real estate value, whether it had soul. And what I saw today was a polished building filled with judgment, fear, and performative courtesy. Beckham paused, letting the words hang. Then he did something no one expected. He took a chair and sat down. "I get it," he said, voice softening. "You didn't know who I was. But here's the thing, I didn't want you to. Because that's the test. How do you treat someone when you think they're nobody?" The silence was suffocating. The representative from Louis Vuitton, a woman named Riley, finally spoke up. "We train staff to be alert. There's been an increase in theft attempts, especially from people who look like they're just browsing." "And what does that look like exactly?" Beckham asked. Riley hesitated. "Well, people who come in alone, dressed down, not carrying shopping bags." David leaned forward, elbows on the table. "So me." She went quiet. He stood again, this time with more energy. "You know what I saw in every store I visited?" he asked, beginning to pace again. "Glass. Glass everywhere. Display cases, windows, doors. The architecture of luxury is built on transparency, but none of you seem to know how to actually see people." That line hit hard. One of the managers at Rolex involuntarily muttered, "Damn," under his breath. Beckham turned toward the floor-to-ceiling windows of the conference room. Below them, the mall buzzed along, completely unaware that a meeting of reckoning was underway just above their heads. He pointed. Right now, a teenage boy in a hoodie could walk past Dior and be judged by 2 employees. A single mom could pause at Gucci and feel out of place because no one smiles at her. A disabled veteran could ask to try on a watch and be told it's out of stock. And every one of those people might walk out feeling small, not because they couldn't afford it, but because they weren't given dignity. Chuck, the security chief, spoke again. "So what do you want us to do, sir?" "Fire people. Suspend staff." Beckham looked him straight in the eyes. "No, that's too easy. I want something harder. I want every store in this building, every security guard, janitor, assistant manager, cashier, to attend a full-day workshop on unconscious bias and customer dignity. Mandatory. Within the next 30 days. The legal counsel raised a brow. "That's ambitious, Mr. Beckham." "Good," he replied. "Let ambition start here." He continued without waiting for approval. "I'm also commissioning an anonymous audit. We're hiring people from all walks of life to test these stores over the next 2 months. Different clothes, different backgrounds. They'll report directly to me. And if we find repeated behavior, discrimination, coldness, profiling, contracts will be reevaluated. Some of you might lose your spots in this plaza." A stunned murmur rippled through the table. David raised a hand to silence it. "This isn't punishment. It's a standard. One we should have had from the start. People don't just spend money on products anymore, they spend it on how they feel in a space." He took a deep breath, then smiled faintly. "And speaking of space, I'm converting the empty wing near the food court into a community zone. Free meeting rooms, pop-up shops for local artists and small business owners, and a reading lounge for kids. Because this place shouldn't only cater to credit cards, it should welcome character." The room was completely still. Then, as if on cue, the door opened again and a young woman stepped in. She looked no older than 25, wearing a staff badge and holding a clipboard. "Sorry to interrupt," she said timidly, "but there's someone asking to speak with Mr. Beckham. A customer from earlier. Says it's important." David looked at her. "What's his name?" "James. He was there when the incident happened. He said he wants to apologize." David nodded. "Send him in." Moments later, James walked in, a middle-aged man in khakis and a fleece vest, looking like a typical suburban dad. His eyes were filled with regret. "I owe you an apology," James said. "I stood there and watched them confront you. I didn't say anything. Worse, I assumed they were right. That you were just some guy causing trouble." Beckham didn't interrupt. James continued. "Then my daughter whispered to me, 'Dad, I think that's David Beckham.' And I realized, then I just watched one of the most famous men in the world be treated like a threat for doing nothing at all. And if it wasn't, then that's even worse." David nodded slowly. "Thank you for saying that." James looked around. "Whatever you're doing here, keep doing it. This place needs it." When James left, the room remained silent for a long moment. Then Beckham spoke. "That's what leadership looks like. Not power. Not money. Accountability." He looked at Chuck. "I want you to spearhead the training program." Chuck blinked. "Me?" "Yes. Because if the head of security doesn't believe in changing how we see people, no one else will." Chuck stood slowly, a man clearly uncomfortable but willing. "I'll do it." Beckham smiled. "Good. You start tomorrow." As the meeting wound down, David gathered his folder and tucked it under his arm. Before he left, he turned back one more time. One day someone will walk through this mall in silence, just looking. And this time, I hope your instinct isn't suspicion but curiosity, and maybe even kindness. Then he walked out. And as the glass door closed behind him, a new reflection took shape in it, not just of David Beckham, but of a place on the verge of transformation. It had been exactly 29 days since David Beckham walked the polished marble floors of Westfield Grand Plaza disguised as an ordinary man. In those 29 days, something subtle yet powerful had begun to shift in the air. Not in headlines, though those came too, but in how people looked at each other inside the sprawling, glass-laden structure. Less suspicion. More eye contact. Fewer whispering glances. More genuine greetings. And now day 30 had arrived. The early afternoon sun filtered in through the high skylights above, casting soft beams of light onto the granite tiles. The mall hummed with weekend energy, families walking in clusters, teenagers laughing with oversized soda cups in hand, elderly couples strolling arm in arm. But at the heart of it all, something was different. There was a new presence in the Grand Plaza, a space that hadn't existed a month ago. The community lounge. What had once been a mostly unused wing near the food court was now vibrant with life. Walls were lined with original murals from local artists, portraits of strength, dignity, and diversity. The center had been transformed into a hub of movement and purpose. A kids' reading nook run by volunteers, 3 small booths operated by young entrepreneurs who'd previously sold handmade products on the sidewalk, and a quiet corner where job seekers were receiving help with resumes. Standing off to the side, arms folded, David Beckham took in the scene with quiet satisfaction. He wasn't wearing a hoodie today. No glasses. Just a simple navy polo shirt and jeans. He had nothing to hide anymore. Behind him, a young employee approached nervously. "Mr. Beckham?" He turned. "Yes. I'm Samantha. I work at the Foot Locker upstairs. I just wanted to say, thank you. I used to dread coming in. I mean, I love my job. But the energy here, especially from the luxury side of the mall, it made people like me feel invisible." David looked her in the eye. "Not anymore." She nodded. "No, not anymore." Samantha turned to leave but then stopped. "Also, I signed up to be part of the second phase of that training you launched, the one on unconscious language. The facilitator said you're reading all the feedback yourself." David smiled. "Every word. Thank you for making someone like me feel seen," she said before walking off into the crowd. He watched her go. Then he turned toward the east wing. Time for the final check. He began his walk. Not disguised, not hidden, not unrecognizable. This time people noticed. Not in a celebrity-hungry way, but in a shared respect kind of way. Some waved. A few approached and thanked him for the changes. One father shook his hand and said his autistic son had finally felt safe enough to enter the Lego store because the atmosphere wasn't so tense anymore. David thanked them all, moved with humility. When he reached the luxury corridor, the same path where everything had unfolded a month earlier, he paused. The Cartier boutique stood quiet and elegant as always. Through the glass, he spotted the same manager who had once sent for security. But she didn't look away. She stepped out from behind the counter and opened the door. "Mr. Beckham," she said, her tone composed but sincere. "Would you care to come inside?" He hesitated a moment, then nodded. Inside, the store looked no different, still gleaming, still pristine, but there was a softness in the way the staff moved now. A young associate, no older than 22, offered him a bottle of water and said, "We're honored to have you." The manager motioned to a small table set up near the back, where a printed sheet of paper was posted on the wall. "We've begun internal inclusivity reflection meetings," she explained. "Weekly. Every Thursday morning. Staff shares experiences, questions, and, well, blind spots. I wanted to let you know that you didn't just change policy, you woke us up." David glanced at the paper. It was titled, "Everyone who walks through our doors deserves to feel seen." He turned to her. "Thank you for not hiding," he said. She nodded. "Thank you for not punishing us." David left the store with a lightness in his step. Back in the corridor, he noticed a new addition. Mounted on a standing plaque in the middle of the walkway was a mirrored installation with etched lettering above it. "Before you judge someone, look at yourself first." It was subtle, but powerful. Designed by local artist Jerome Davis, whose mural also adorned the community wing. It reflected the faces of those who passed by, encouraging introspection, not shame. As David approached the security station, the very one where the call had been made weeks ago, he found Chuck Harmon, the head of security, sitting at the reception desk, laughing with two young interns in new maroon uniforms. Chuck stood up immediately when he saw him. "Mr. Beckham," he said, straightening his back. "Welcome back. You're right on time." "For what?" David asked. Chuck grinned. "For the surprise." Before David could respond, a familiar voice echoed from behind. "Hey man." He turned around. It was James, the father who'd come to apologize during the meeting weeks ago. Only this time he wasn't alone. His teenage daughter stood beside him, holding a small laminated card. "We signed up as volunteers for the Youth Mentorship Pilot Program," James said, handing over the card. "My daughter's been helping at the reading lounge. She said she's never felt more included." David looked at the girl. "Thank you for being brave." She shrugged, then said, "You were brave first." Chuck walked over with a folder in hand. "These are the results from the 2-month audit. Want to take a look?" David opened the folder. Store engagement up by 35%. Incidents of reported profiling down 72%. Customer satisfaction surveys across all demographics, up 40%. Notably, the Section 4, sense of welcome, had risen higher than any other metric. He handed the folder back, speechless for a moment. Chuck cleared his throat. "One more thing, sir." He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it. Inside was a stainless steel pin shaped like a door slightly ajar. "We had this made for you. It's not much, but it's what you did. You opened a door." David looked at it for a long time, then pinned it onto his shirt. As he left the station, a reporter nearby, one of many who had quietly followed the Beckham at the Mall saga, caught up. "Mr. Beckham, just one question. What do you think is the legacy of what you did here?" David didn't stop walking. He just smiled and said, "I didn't do anything special. I just paid attention. And then I asked everyone else to do the same." He kept walking. Down the hall where he was once followed. Past the doors he was once denied. Through the glass walls that once reflected doubt, and now reflected possibility. Because some walks aren't about buying anything. Some walks are about proving that dignity should never be for sale. And in that quiet walk without fear, David Beckham had done something bigger than any endorsement or investment. He'd reminded people of something they should have never forgotten in the first place. That every person deserves to be treated like they belong. Even, especially when no one's watching.